May I speak?
Do you want to wait till we're on the record?
I just would like to have everybody raise their paddles so I can just have some idea of where everyone is at.
Okay. Why doesn't everyone raise their paddles real quick?
Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Ready? Okay, first of all, my name is Judge Burchett. I want to thank all of you for being here this morning. I really appreciate it. I know that all of you are extremely busy. I know some of you have other places you had to be this morning. And so we're going to be talking about that. And what we needed to do was we needed to have you all show up because we've had such a shortage lately. We have had to call off juries. We've had to have mistrials. So I appreciate all of you being here today. And what I wanted to tell you is I also want to thank you for wearing your masks. I know it's not real comfortable, but I do appreciate it. Today's case is a criminal case. It is called the City of Longview versus Michael J. Wood. And the city has charged the defendant with the crime of assault in the 4th degree. The defendant has entered a plea of not guilty to the charge, and he is presumed innocent throughout the entire trial today until you go back to deliberations. The filing of the charge itself is not evidence that, in fact, he did anything wrong. The City of Longview was represented by Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Steve Schuman. And Mr. Schuman, if you could please introduce yourself.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Schuman. I represent the City of Longview.
Thank you, sir. And the defendant is represented by Mr. Brungard. Mr. Brungard, if you could please introduce yourself and your client.
Thank you, Judge. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Robert Brungard, and today I'm having the opportunity to represent Michael Wood. And Michael, if you'll stand up and say good morning.
Morning, folks.
Thank you.
We intend to complete this case today, and we're going to have it submitted for jury deliberation by the end of the day. So this is how we're going to start. We're going to start with something called voir dire. What that means is we are going to be questioning jurors. We're going to go to select a 6-person jury. During the selection process, the attorneys and I are going to be asking you some questions. The law requires you to take an oath and to answer these questions truthfully. I'm going to ask everyone here today to please stand up. I'm also going to ask you at this time to please raise your right hand, and the clerk is going to go ahead and administer the oath.
Do each of you solemnly swear to truthfully answer all questions asked of you by the court or counsel relating to your qualifications for acting as jurors in this trial? If you agree, answer, I do.
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. The right to a jury trial, of course, means a right to an impartial jury. It's important that all jurors decide the case based on the evidence presented and not on their own personal feelings, and on the instructions of the law that I'm going to provide you before you go back to deliberations today. When the attorneys and I ask questions, it's to make sure you'll be able to put aside any preconceptions that you might have or any biases and decide the case based purely on the evidence and the law I'm going to provide you. After the attorneys and I ask our questions, each side will have the opportunity to exclude up to 3 jurors, which are known as peremptory challenges. What that means is that each attorney may decide to not select 3 people just based on any reason that they want at all. They don't have to have reasons for the challenges. The decisions are indicated privately when they come up to the bench. At this time, I'd like to begin by asking some general questions to all of you. What I need you to do is you can answer yes, probably yes, and I want you to raise your hand so that we can see what number you are, and I will probably ask you what your name is. And then the other attorneys can ask follow-up questions if in fact they want to do that. So first of all, has anybody heard of this case before? Again, it's the City of Longview versus Michael Wood. Has anybody heard of this case before? Go ahead, raise your hand if you have. When you were in the lobby before you were called in, did you hear anyone talking about this case at all? Do you know Mr. Wood? Does anybody know Mr. Wood that's in the room right now? Do you know either of the attorneys? I'm going to read the name of the potential witnesses. When I read the names of the potential witnesses, again, what I need you to do is raise your hand if you're familiar with them. Officer Brian Durbin of Longview. Yes, sir, number 11. And your name, please?
Robert, yes.
Thank you, sir. And how do you know him?
I work with him.
Okay, and is that going to be an issue today as far as being able to remain unbiased?
It should be.
Okay. Does anyone have any follow-up questions at all?
None.
Okay. Officer Elijah Heston. Does anybody know Mr. Heston? Wendy Stodinger. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir. And you know Mr. Heston is in the same way? Okay. And is that going to prevent you again from being able to be impartial today?
No.
Okay, thank you. Wendy Stodinger. Does anyone know a Catch Stodinger? Finally, Adriana Stodinger. Now, do any of you have any experience in the law and justice field? If you do, again, raise your hand, and I'm expecting number 11 to raise his hand. Sir, what experience do you have?
I'm a patrol sergeant for the city of Woodland.
City of what?
Woodland.
Okay, sir. And is that going to stop you again from being able to be unbiased today?
No.
Okay, does anybody else have any experience personally in law and justice? Does anybody have any close friends or relatives in law and justice? Now, when I say law and justice, I'm talking courts, attorneys, police, corrections, probation. Okay, yes, number 11.
My brother works for the city of Longview.
Okay, and in what capacity?
As a police officer.
Okay, sir, thank you. And again, is that going to create any issues for you today?
No, Your Honor.
And what is your brother's name?
Richard Gibbs.
Okay, thank you. And who else? Thank you, number 17.
My wife,
Okay, and what does she do?
Multnomah County Corrections Technician for probation and parole.
Okay, thank you. And is that going to prevent any issues for you today? Okay. Anyone else have any relatives at all in any capacity in law enforcement, probation, corrections? All right. Now, after we've heard all the evidence, I'm going to give the jury detailed instructions on what the law is. And what these are called is these are called jury instructions. And I'm going to go over how the defendant is presumed innocent, how the state has a burden of proving each element of the case in order to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to explain what the role of the attorneys are and what my role is and what the jury's role is. How many of you have served on a jury before? Okay, quite a few. Thank you. And again, I'm going to read the jury instructions to you. You'll have a copy of them to refer to during your deliberation. So it's important that everyone is on the same page when you go back to the jury room. So I'd like to ask, is there anybody here who can't assure me that you will in fact follow my instructions when I give you the jury instructions? As I said, we expect this to be over by the end of the day. Now, will serving on this jury cause a substantial hardship for anyone? If it will, go ahead and raise your hand. And again, this is a one-day jury. Now, don't be shy. If there's going to be an issue where you're not going to be able to concentrate, I want you to go ahead and raise your hand because you're going to need to be focused for the entire day. So I'm going to start with number 13. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. We do have hearing devices. Is that your issue as far as being able to hear? Okay, let's see if this works for you. And if you make the jury, we can also make certain that you're closer as well. Okay, number 4, what is your issue?
I just don't know if I'm super fit for this job, but I'm willing to do it.
Okay, so right now you're kind of undecided.
Yeah.
Okay, number 8.
I have glaucoma, congenital glaucoma, and I was born with it, so I don't see very well. My vision, they can only correct my vision to like 20/50 at best. So with my contacts in, I see about
Okay, sir, what is your name?
David Lawson.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Number 3.
Yes, I'm having some personal issues, and I can't concentrate very well, and I get a what do you call it? I take trazodone to keep me so.
Okay, what's your name, sir?
Greg Frost.
Okay. Let me hold off on that for a minute, all right? Let me see how many jurors we're going to end up with. Number 11.
So, just being honest, Your Honor, I was a night shift worker and I didn't schedule to work graveyard tonight, and I'm actually not able to get out of that, so it's all my mind, that's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, I need you to get it out of your mind.
I understand.
Okay, so go ahead and see what you can do. Anybody else? Okay. Are there any follow-up questions to anyone? Is there anyone that feels like they're going to be biased about this case? Okay. Sir, I can't remember what your name was, sir, in the front there that was taking the trazodone.
Mr. Gibbs.
Mr. Gibbs, I'm going to go ahead and excuse you at this
I
time.
mean,
Yes.
Mr. Frost, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, I'm going to go ahead and excuse you at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any objection to me excusing him?
No, no objection to Mr. Frost being excused.
Mr. Schuman?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frost, for showing up.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead and leave your badge on the table, or on your chair. There you go. Okay, thank you. Okay, once again, is there anything about this case that would cause anyone to begin the trial having a prejudice one way or the other? Finally, is there any reason any of you feel that you would not be able to be a juror in this case today? Now, when you checked in, your names were drawn in random order, and I'm going to ask the clerk to read the first 12 names on the list. When your name is read, please come forward, and then she's going to direct you. Oh, then go ahead and sit where they're sitting.
Yeah, you don't have to read their names until after peremptory.
Okay. So at this point, each attorney is going to have about 15 minutes to ask questions of their prospective jurors. What we're going to do is we're going to start with the city of Longview as a prosecutor, and then we'll go over to the defense. So go ahead, Mr. Schuman.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for being here. I first off want to apologize if you see me sitting down here either now or through the rest of the trial. Normally, when we address jurors out of respect, we stand up. The COVID situation has sort of put a damper on that to a limited extent. We're supposed to keep a certain distance from the microphone. It's difficult sometimes for me to do that while I'm standing. So I appreciate your indulgence. I apologize. It's not being disrespectful. I want to first ask a question that I always ask right at the start, and that is, I normally try to predict when the case is going to the jury. I predict that the case is going to get to the jury, that it'll get to you for deliberations if you are picked on the jury by about 3 p.m. this afternoon, possibly earlier, possibly 2 p.m. And maybe a variation on the judge's question. The judge asked if it's going to pose a substantial hardship for you to be here all day and possibly in the evening. I don't think it's going to go that far, but I can't rule out that possibility. My question is it not so much a hardship? Is there going to be like a pain in the neck inconvenience, like your favorite son is on the track team and he's scheduled for a meet this evening and you don't want to miss it? Something like that. Yes, back.
I have a grandson playing basketball, and this is the last game of the season.
Okay, about what time is that?
4 o'clock.
Okay. Do you think you could still serve on this jury without concentrate on the facts?
Yeah, I can. I'll be disappointed, but I can.
Okay. Yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am.
I'm diabetic and I have to like eat every so often. So if it goes too late, as long as there's places to eat in here, I'm probably okay, but.
Okay. Let me ask you, are you able to hear us okay now?
Yes, it's just concentration a little bit, but otherwise I kind of like this thing.
Okay, thank you. Another question I always ask, I've always asked from day one since I've been here. As you sit here, you've learned that 2 of the witnesses are Longview police officers. Sometimes people, through no fault of their own, have experiences that leave them with kind of a bad taste in their mouth towards police officers in general. For example, rudeness or perceived rudeness at a traffic stop. Anybody ever had that kind of experience that might affect your ability to try or assess the credibility of the police officer? Yes, sir.
I was arrested one time under, it was a illegal search and seizure, so that's kind of left a bad taste in my mouth.
And you're Mr. Barnum?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Anyone else? Another question, the judge mentioned that the citation, that the charge is 4th-degree assault. This is what sometimes has been labeled as a domestic case, a case between two people who have been living together, a man and a woman, domestic violence case. Anybody, now that they know that this is that type of case, anybody have a problem with deciding that type of a case? One more question. This is a case that's, you're going to have to decide who's telling the truth and who isn't. You're gonna have to decide credibility. There's going to be testimony that fact A happened. There's gonna be testimony that fact A didn't happen. There's gonna be two sides. Anybody have a problem with deciding who's telling the truth and who isn't? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Schuman. Mr. Brungard.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Robert Brungard, and on the 28th day of last month, I've been doing this for 42 years. No applause. I'm just saying that because of the reason I'm as nervous today as I was 42 years ago, speaking to you. And you probably are wondering, well, why? Well, I'll tell you in a very succinct manner. This young man came to me almost a year ago because it's taken a long time for us to get to jury. But he came to me a year ago and said, you know, Robert, I want you to use your experience to find 6 jurors who are going to be fair. And I said, well, that's really a grand idea. That's really an idea that everybody who believes in the justice system really wants to have happen. There's one glitch. Why, Ms. Dean, might it be impossible or difficult for me in 15 minutes to find 6 people who are going to be fair and impartial?
We haven't heard the case yet, so we don't know what the details are. We have to listen first.
Okay. Mr. Reardon, do you have any idea why in the next 15 minutes it might be difficult for me to find 6 people who are going to be fair and impartial?
Nothing comes to mind immediately.
We don't know when they're doing.
No.
We haven't had coffee. Is that correct? And Ms. Honda, I've never met you before, have I? I don't know anything about you, do I? I don't know anything about your education, do I? Mr. Lopez, we've never chatted, have we? Okay. So if none of us have ever chatted, if I don't know anything about your education, if I know nothing about your family, why, sir, is that going to make it difficult for me to find 6 people who are going to be fair?
I don't know.
That's right. I don't know. And yet, and the judge does her best. She's giving me 15 minutes to find 6 people who are going to be fair. Now, Mr. Gibbs, do you think that's going to be difficult?
Yes, sir.
When you occasionally encounter a citizen out there and you don't know who they are, you have to make some real quick judgments, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And that's what I'm doing today. I've got to make some quick judgments because, you know, years ago, John Adams was one of our first presidents. He made the statement that the trial by jury is the heart and soul of our liberty. Why, ma'am, is trial by jury perhaps the heart and soul of our liberty?
Because it gives everybody the chance to have peers and others, decide what the truth is there.
Okay. And, sir, back in 1776, do you think that the jury idea, who did that protect us from in 1776? Who was running America prior to the Independence Day? Who was the man? Who was the emperor? The king, right? And the king could do what he wanted. cared about us little people? Do you think so? Do you think so? No. That's why trial by jury is the heart and soul of our system. And without it, there is no keeping the government, the king, from dictating who's going to be guilty and who's going to be innocent, correct? Now, do you think, sir, what do you think of the idea that somebody can't be found guilty unless they're proven beyond a reasonable doubt? What do you think about that idea? Don't you think Mr. Lopez, I'm sorry, it's not Mr. Lopez, is it? It is. Well, Mr. Lopez, do you think it's fair that we make the government prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt? Should it be on a lesser standard? Like, maybe it happened, could it happen, you're guilty? Pardon me? Why isn't that good? Well, why isn't it good that that's a lesser standard? Can you help us out?
I don't know.
Okay. Can you help us out? Why is beyond a reasonable doubt the standard? Okay, well, I'll give you a clue. It is said that the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt allows the jury to go home and sleep at night. Any idea why after a jury trial and having the standard of reasonable doubt, the jury can go home and sleep peacefully at night? Do you have any idea, ma'am?
Well, my theory is you're innocent until proven guilty.
The reason why it is said is because if it's beyond a reasonable doubt, the juror doesn't have to go home and wonder, did I do the right thing? Because if they've proven beyond a reasonable doubt, that juror can go home, go to bed, and awaken the next morning and know that they did the proper, and they reached the proper verdict. Does that sound fair? Who knows who Paul Harvey is? Ever heard of Paul Harvey? Come on. Some of you must remember Paul. Thank you. Anybody else remember Paul Harvey? There we go. Anybody else? The rest of the story. Okay, thank you way back there. Where for the rest of you who don't know, for many, many years, at 12 o'clock every single day, at our local radio station in Vancouver and Olympia and New York and Kansas City, he would come on the air and he would give you the rest of the story. And what's important about that is today, you're going to hear the rest of the story. Any of you know what recency is? Ever heard of that? Recency? It's a psychological term. How about primacy? Who goes first today?
Prime means first.
Pardon me?
Primus is Latin for usually first, isn't it?
What primacy is the one who goes first. The state goes first. And it is well known with neuropsychologists and psychologists and people in that field who deal with memory that the person who goes first, you are going to remember his or her story. That's what Paul Harvey said. You're going to remember Mr. Schumann's story. I go second. You won't. Now, there's another phenomenon. It's called recency. The last thing that you hear is going to be what you remember. So you're going to remember the first and you're going to remember the last. Who goes last today? Mr. Schumann. Where do I go? Well, I'm that bologna in the middle of the sandwich. I'm in the middle. So I don't have a chance. But if you remember Paul Harvey, and if you remember those simple words, the rest of the story, I might be able to eke out something for you to remember in the jury room. And that's the rest of the story. That's what I'm here to do today, is to present the rest of the story on behalf of Michael. Michael's accused of a crime. Is he presumed innocent or guilty? Yes. What is he? What is he presumed? Is he presumed innocent or guilty?
Innocent.
Pardon me?
Innocent until proven guilty.
Okay. And you were Mr. Wood?
Clausen.
Thank you. Thank you. He's presumed innocent, and he is presumed innocent for how long, sir? How long is he presumed innocent today?
Until we decide whether he's guilty or not.
That's right. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Do you realize here in America, it is harder to convict a man or woman of a crime than it is to take a child? Isn't the parent-child relationship the sacred, the bond, the concrete, the fabric of our society? Do you agree it is? And yet, do you realize that the courts can take a child from parents for less than reasonable, beyond a reasonable doubt? There's a lesser standard. And my point is, that goes to show how important Michael's rights are today. You have got to find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the highest there is in the law. Do you think it's fair, sir, that the government has to do that?
That's how it works.
Pardon me?
That's how it works.
Okay. Do you think it'd be better if instead of having a jury trial, we just had a couple people randomly come in and hear a case? And no, why not? Courtrooms are like a church. You ever been to a church? Where does the minister, where does the father, where does the deacon reside? Where? Do they reside in the front or the back of the church? Come on, tell me. Just answer all. In the front. And are they elevated?
Yes.
Yes. Because we respect them. They demand our attention. They demand our obedience. Where do you have any ideas, sir, where the idea of 12 jurors comes from?
I don't.
Comes from Christianity. It comes from Christ. He had 12 disciples. Now, if this was a felony, we'd have 12 jurors. But this is a lesser crime, so we only have 6. But this is like a church. And who do we come here today to honor? Who do we come here today to honor now? We come here to honor our Constitution, don't we? The truth. That's right. Thank you. Is there any of you who believe that you cannot honor the truth, as that young lady has just said? Is there any of you who come today who does not want to learn the truth? Do any of you come here already thinking you know the truth? Does anybody think they already know the truth about this case? Anybody? You have clean minds. You have a clean slate. You are willing to listen to and determine what the truth is today. Are you willing to do that, ma'am? Are you willing to learn the truth? Are you, sir? Are you, sir? Are you? How about you, ma'am? Have you got the time to do that today? Have you got the energy to do that today? Do you have the stamina to do that today? Mr. Gibbs, how about you? I know you're going to go to work on graveyard. I'm going to make this easy on you. You're far enough back that there's real good likelihood you're going to do that graveyard shift wide awake tonight, okay? But if not, are you coming here today who want to learn the truth?
Yes, sir.
If one of you says no, you know what the worst thing is going to happen if you don't think you can be fair and impartial? You're not going to be in the gallows outside. We're not going to punish you. You know what the worst thing that could happen today is if you're accused from this jury? What do you think that is, sir? What's the worst thing that could happen today? You go out in the sunshine. It's Memorial Day weekend. You got a 4-day weekend. You get paid by your employer. We don't punish. So again, to the person at the front of this Church of Truth, to my client, and to this old balding fat guy after 42 years, are you capable of doing this job? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Do you want to do this job?
Yep.
Then I pass this jury for cause.
Thank you. Now that the attorneys and I have had a chance to ask our questions, we're going to proceed to the final step of the jury selection process, which is what I was talking to you about. This is where the attorneys are going to go ahead and they are going to get to use their peremptory challenges, and they're going to be able to excuse up to 3 jurors per side. So I'm going to wait for the attorneys to go ahead and approach me, and then we'll go from there. Okay, make sure you show me.
So what we've been doing is, because we don't pass this back and forth anymore, I can show this to you, and then you write down on your paper. So you write it on the back of your paper, and then I write it down.
May we see the paddles just for a moment, Judge?
I'm sorry?
The paddles, may we see them?
Yes, could you raise your paddles one more time, please?
Thank you. And you can blame it on the attorney with the poor memory. Thank you.
Is that long enough? You good?
That's long enough.
Okay.
Okay, do you have a piece of paper to write down? You accept?
Okay.
And I'm stuck with my earlier comment because he didn't do anything, so we're done.
So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because that one's yours, and that one's gone.
Yeah. Good.
So let me write it down, Judge.
So now do I name them or do you name them?
You'll read out, I would read those and tell them to remain seated, and everybody else can.
So just tell these people to remain seated. Okay. Okay, so we have our list. This is how we're going to do this. What I'm going to do is the people that I'm going to name, I want you to remain seated because you are, in fact, going to be the jurors for the case. And so the first person, and then the other people that are not named, you can go ahead and proceed with the bailiffs. So the first person I'm going to name that's going to be on the jury is going to be Nancy Bean. Could you raise your hand? Okay, ma'am. The next one I'm going to name is Mike Reardon. Thank you, Mr. Reardon. Next one I am going to name is Emily Honga. Thank you, Emily. Next person I'm going to name is Janice Freimeyer. Thank you. Finally, the next person is Ian Wood. Thank you, Mr. Wood. And finally, the last one is going to be David Clausen. Thank you. And so at this point, we are going to go ahead. Those are going to be our 6 jurors, and everyone else may be excused. And you may go ahead and leave your paddles on your chair. Thank you very much for your service. I really appreciate it. So at this point, we are going to go ahead and are we going to take the brief recess at this moment?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to take a brief recess. A bailiff is going to lead you to the deliberations room, and then we will go ahead and bring you back.